Hello, everyone, and welcome to the paddock. My name is Henrik.
And my name is Sierra, and we are going over our predictions for the rest of the season of F1. This is going to give me a headache.
Oh boy, it's been a good season.
Very good season. Just a brief note before we fully start there's apparently a rumor that Red Bull is going to announce Sergio Perez's retirement. This was again happened last year too, so take it with a pinch of salt, people.
Can't the Paris conversations just end?
I mean, the Paris conversations were he's losing his seat or getting kicked. This is his retirement. But it does, retirement.
Yeah, in quotations.
Yep.
That's what I mean. Can we please just
No.
have 1 week without rumors?
No. We're already convinced Danny isn't in the seat come Coda. Now it's back to Sergio Perez.
Give me 1 single week without a Red Bull controversial opinion.
I don't know what to tell you. I can't. I'm not the one making the rumors.
Please,
If I was,
someone.
I think I'd be living somewhere else. I think I'd be going to every race. If I was that inside.
Please, someone, just give me 1 week of my life.
We have 4 weeks of no racing. I'll take any rumor I can get. If a rumor comes out that Daniel Ricciardo is still in his seat come Coda, I'll cry.
Okay, I'm saying this now, but if he ends up driving IndyCar next year,
Are we
I
talking
will
about
watch
Perez?
every single race.
Are we saying Perez or are we saying Daniel?
Daniel.
If he's in the main seat?
No, if he were to drive IndyCar next year,
Oh, Indy. Okay.
I will watch every single race.
Have fun with that time schedule. That's me. That is my time schedule there, buddy.
Oh, damn.
Because it's an American league.
Oh, no, it's an American formula. Ugh.
It's IndyCar. It's good. IndyCar is another subject.
Of course, we can do an F1 fans guide to IndyCar if that floats your boat. But
Please, I already have so much on my plate. I don't need another thing.
who knows?
I mean, we have Logan Sargent possibly going to IndyCar. He's having a test in November. I mean, I feel like you were gonna watch IndyCar anyway with Prema coming in as a team next year.
Yeah, could be. If Daniel Ricciardo were to drive at Prema alongside Callum Ilott, I will be there for it.
All right, I just wanted to throw that out there because it is news. I guess the other news is that one, we said Zay Maloney in our F2 in our F2 predictions that he has a seat in Formula E next year. So the main contenders for the second Sauber seat are looking to be Colapinto, Bortoleto, and Bottas is the last I saw. So Mick is out of the discussions.
Of course, Daddy Valves had his little famous Mick is good but not special quote not too long ago. So
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying he's right, but if you look at Mick's time on the grid when he got there,
he was with Haas.
yes, but he also had I'm not saying that Haas was good, but the fact that in both seasons that he was on the grid, yes, one of his teammates was Mazepin and the other one was Magnussen. And Magnussen was a late call up. I think look at more that season. He was very crash happy.
Yeah, I know. Of course, we have F1 Voldemort, like you mentioned, who was spin happy. So
Plus, in my opinion, I don't mind Mick. I think he's a lovely personality. If you had to have me choose about who I want in the seat, I would say Bottas because he's still on the grid so he can help develop the team and he knows the team so they have and it's not because I think Bottas is a bad driver. I just think when it comes to that team switching to Audi in 2026, having a driver who's still in the system can help. Not saying Hulkenberg needs the help, but help integrate a little bit. Plus, Bottas is reliable, so if they can get the car right, you can hopefully see him score points. I mean, he was consistent enough in Mercedes. He was consistent enough last season when they did score points.
But they were good last season, don't forget.
No, I know. I'm not saying, but I'm saying like out of Zhou and Bottas last season, Bottas outperformed Zhou, which is why I think he's still technically considered. Yes, he is technically the last one in the standings this season, but I think that's more due to the car. And then when it comes,
The car is, of course, an insult to tractors,
yes, it's a
like
wheelie
you called
bin.
it.
It's a wheelie bin with a really bad engine.
A neon dustbin,
Hmm
like Matthew Gallagher keeps saying on their
I
podcast.
mean, no one's gonna deny that. But and
Nope.
then the other reason why I think Mick is not in consideration is because he did also have his time on the grid and he didn't get to prove himself. You do have and you have the rookies now in Colapinto in Bortoletto as well, who it's being shown that the rookies are up to the task of getting in that seat.
Look at Colapinto. He has proven himself in F1 for the past few races.
I think that's also why, if you're looking at who technically they could take, I think because Teo Pourchaire is no longer he won F2 because he hasn't been in a car, so we can't see him consistently. Yes, I know he's dabbled in the IndyCar scene for McLaren, but when he won his championship, I think was a bad timing for him to win.
Because all the seats were filled in advance. No seats were vacant.
And then then he has to sit, but then as he sits, we get all these others. And even though a lot of the F2 drivers, I want to say besides like Behrman and Antonelli, aren't lighting up the season in F2, but you're seeing how consistent the other drivers are, that I think it does kind of outshine a former F2 winner to who's on the grid now.
And of course, we have people like Lance Stroll, who is a very good pay driver.
Are you sure you want to say he's good?
Well, a good pay driver. I'm not saying he is good.
I would just say he's a paid driver. I wouldn't say he's good. I would
He
say
is,
he's inconsistent.
yep, he is not a good driver, but he is good for a pay driver. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, if you're comparing it to Mazepin, sure.
Well, I'm not only comparing him to Mazepin. I'm comparing him to Latifi and numerous
Leave
other
Go
pay drivers.
leave Gotifi out of this.
Nope.
All right, let's get to the actual predictions. So, mathematically, here is who's still in the fight for P1 for the driver standings. Of course, it's Max sitting at at 131 points in first. Then you have Lando Norris in second with 279 points. You have Charles Leclerc in third with 245 points, and Oscar Piastri in fourth with 237. Mathematically, those are still, well, Max is in the lead. Mathematically, those are your top three still able to fight for the championships this year. Unfortunately, Carlos Sainz, who's in fifth, is only at 190. RIP.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're trying to be like theoretically who's the actual contender in to Verstappen, it is Lando. One, because the McLaren is just another level, but also Ferrari in general had a atrocious 3 races starting in Canada, and that kind of screwed over both their drivers.
But it let McLaren be good and show what they are capable of doing.
Yeah, it allowed McLaren to have an easier time to one be second in the standings in terms of the drivers, because I think especially after, like, if you look at the past couple races, Leclerc has shown his form again, but also just in the constructors, it is a little bit more. It did allow McLaren to have an easier time taking that first spot. Of course, in the constructors right now, it's McLaren sitting first at 516. It's Red Bull sitting second at 475 points, and then it's Ferrari sitting third at 441 points. Those are who you are expecting to fight for the constructors championship. Mercedes is in fourth, but they are only at 329 points. And don't get me started on the bottom five, as none of them are over triple digits.
That's why we don't need to start at the bottom 5.
Nope. We only really need the top four, or top three. Mercedes is going to finish fourth.
Yeah.
Their car's too freaking inconsistent for me to say that they maybe get to third.
Their car is basically what McLaren was like in 2022.
The beginning of 2022, yeah. Well, no, 2022 in general.
The
Beginning of last year.
McLaren 2022 was very inconsistent all year round.
Mercedes just baits us. They've been baiting us since the regulation change.
So
This season was more because they won 3 races in a row and then freaking fell off the face of the earth.
so they had a string of horrible races,
I mean, I wouldn't say where they were horrible races. We got
but they were bad.
they weren't bad, they were just inconsistent. They were never the fastest car in my opinion.
No, and no one has ever said they were the fastest car, so I won't really fault you for that.
But I wouldn't say their race was bad because it was George won unexpectedly in Austria when Max and Lando crashed together. Lewis won based on strategy, but also that car actually having pace in Silverstone. And then Lewis then won in Spa. Well, George won in Spa, got DQ'd because he did a one stop and there were issues with weight, and then Lewis won. And you can say, if anything, the McLarens were out of place in a lot of those. Of course, Lando lost due to the strategy calls in Silverstone were probably the main issues for them for not winning the race for McLaren in Silverstone. You had, of course, the crash that happened in Austria between him and Max. So that cost McLaren the win in Austria.
Mm.
And then Spa, both Oscar and Lando were out of position in qualifying, so but also Lando was stuck behind. It was a DRS nightmare at Spa, and Lando was stuck behind Max, and then Oscar was on the tail ends of the Mercedes fighting but couldn't get past. So I think it's down more to tracks and team play rather than consistency and pace.
Yep. Look at the place like Hungary.
I was gonna say, just look at Singapore that just happened. Lewis qualified third. I mean, yes, he started on softs, but he still qualified third, and then he finished sixth, where everybody thought the Ferraris would finish because Ferraris had a disastrous qualifying session. And yet in that race, you had Charles just behind Russell, who, if there was maybe 1 or 2 more laps, could have maybe took fourth. And then you had Sainz. I don't remember how close he was behind Lewis. Hold on, let me double check this. But give your opinions. I'm just finding a result quickly.
I'm gonna say that the McLarens are 1 and 2. Red Bull will probably end up third and eighth, and Mercedes will probably end up fourth and fifth or something like that.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I heard McLaren 1, 2. Then it was Red Bull what?
Red Bull third and eighth.
Okay. And then and then you said Merc was next?
Yes.
Where are the Ferraris?
Fifth and sixth, and of course Ferrari seventh and ninth.
Are you saying how the race ended or how the season's gonna end?
No, how the season will end, of course.
You think the Mercedes, the Merc, the most inconsistent car on the grid, is going to get to third?
Yes.
What have you been smoking? All right. So just because I did calculations, Carlos finished 10 seconds behind Lewis in Singapore. Yeah, no, I don't see that happening.
Well, the Ferrari hasn't really been liking a lot of these later tracks on the calendar, being Cota, Mexico, Brazil, and so on. And I think Mercedes can really bounce back.
Well, the reason I say that's not happening is because of math. I can see Lewis getting fifth over Carlos. I could see maybe that happening. And I can see maybe George getting there, but that's pulling a stretch. But I don't think Oscar can get to second. Two, we have a month off. The teams do not have to shut down. They can work throughout the whole month. And three, I think Red Bull has a chance. One, they're probably finishing third. Two, I think Max will finish second, possibly third. It's more or less second. But I think for the most part, you're looking at, for me at least, you're looking at if let's say the Red Bull doesn't figure out in the next 4 weeks, don't figure out the car, and they either one finish out the top 5 for the rest of the races, or just finish in like the most they get is third. I see the final standings being Lando first, Max second, Charles third, Oscar fourth.
Right. I'm not gonna say too much about that.
And I say this because also Ferrari's upgrades have worked that they brought to Monza. So for them to be consistently the second fastest car, in my opinion, in terms of the constructors, unless McLaren, like, they have reliability issues, I see McLaren taking first. I see Ferrari getting up to second, and then I see Red Bull sitting in third.
Okay. That's interesting.
And I will say the reason I think Oscar doesn't get Charles, unless again, this is not this is me leaving out any DNFs because I just can't. I'm not gonna predict that. I just think in terms of qualifying pace, Charles, one, has always been really good at qualifying, but two, it just seems that Oscar is his qualifying this season has kind of been what his downfall. Now you can say Baku is different because he qualified second, but
Mhm. Baku was the exception that confirmed the rule, more or less.
breaking news. It's announced literally now. Danny is leaving Red Bull.
So he is leaving the Red Bull family.
Yep, he's departing from Red Bull. It literally is breaking right now.
So it's breaking as of September 26th.
At 11, well, for me, 11:49 in the morning. This is Eastern Standard Time, people. I mean, we all knew it was coming,
More or less, yeah.
but it still sucks.
Yep. I hope that he signs with Prema in IndyCar for next year. If so, I'm here for it.
Can we just state, what if, like, Salah/Audi, like, I know we just said, like, the top, there's 3 people they're contending for. What if they just, pull a freaking fast one and sign Danny for next year? Reunite Danny and Hulkenberg.
Oh yeah, we
Bring
have
us
the
back.
Hülkenberg thing again.
Bring back the Renault days.
Well, it would be fun to see how that plays out again. Again, we don't know what will happen if he were to quote unquote retire and move on to IndyCar. Then, of course, that won't happen.
I mean, we knew it was coming. I mean, look at Singapore in general, but it's not how you want to see it. I know a lot of people are making the comparisons of, like, when Danny left. I know we're now on a different track, but I think we've given our predictions at this point to the season. I think a lot of people were like, when he came back for Red Bull, that Red Bull wouldn't treat him as bad as McLaren did.
No, and of course that didn't really happen.
But I would say that, yes, even though McLaren did end up dropping him for Oscar, and you could say the management was definitely not on his side. If you
No.
compare the strategy at VCarb is ridiculous for both of them, like both Yuki and Daniel. Nobody really knows what's happening over there. But if you were to tell me that Red Bull, which we know they're brutal, like don't get me wrong, they've been one of the teams to drop people mid-season, like don't get me wrong there. But if you told me that both Danny and Checo, this was their season, like this was the way that the season's going played out the way it was, and you told me they dropped one of the drivers, and knowing that the V carb is not as good as the Red Bull and all this other stuff, if you told me that, I would have said, well, and asked me who Red Bull dropped, I would have said Checo.
Again with the Paris conversation.
What else do you say at this point, though? Like, I understand Danny didn't like blow Sonoda out of the water, but
But
one,
yeah,
you got to remember Sonoda has been in the V carb system, like that specific system, since he came into this to F1.
okay. Think of it like this: if Checo and Daniel were to switch seats, what would then happen?
I think Daniel would still I think Daniel would be closer to Max. Daniel has more pace. Like, yeah, he's finishing far behind Yuki, but I blame that on strategy.
The V carb strategy is horrendous. I
Like,
won't really argue against that.
so that's why I'm like, if you were to ask me if the season played out the way that it has, and between Daniel and Checo, who's losing their seat, I would have said Checo. And a lot of people I think would have said Checo because Checo, ever since Miami, Checo's been like, he's literally been nowhere. Nowhere. Like the
Mm,
closest he's been was in Baku. And yes, I understand that he crashed with Carlos and there was that, but that doesn't change anything. It's one track. One track isn't changing anything.
no, I didn't. I didn't say that either. I won't say that.
But I'm saying like if that's Red Bull's conclusion of, oh, they wanted to give him 5 more races or the next 4 races at Monza, Baku, Singapore, and Zandvoort, like saying that's where he performs more. You can't consistently keep that, especially because now they're later in the season. Well, at least Baku is later in the season.
Of course, as you said, Red Bull are known for being brutal.
Like, I get the Red Bull isn't that good and they didn't listen to Checo, but you find a way to work around it. Like, look, Max found a way to work around it, and I think he's still finding a way to work around it, and Checo just can't. I'm not saying Daniel could work around it, but I think maybe Daniel has a better chance of working around it.
Yeah, that was why I said have them switch seats.
But they didn't.
No, but if they had done that, I think they would have gotten a return a return on investment. If that were the case, I don't know what to say at this point.
I don't know. I really I don't know. It's like it especially because like I wish they just would have said it in Singapore. Like this will be Danny's last race.
Yeah, that would be a lot better if they had gone out and said a few days before Singapore that this is his final race in F1. That would have been a lot better, but no, they didn't. They kept us on our toes. A few days go by and this happens.
Well, it doesn't like even though it wasn't even the fact that they didn't have to tell like sure, you don't have to tell us. Like that's perfectly fine, but we are annoyed off it. You
Mm,
then also have to deal with the fact that they gave him a horrible race.
yes,
The race they gave him absolutely sucked. Nobody wants to go out that way. The only
and
thing the only
and
thing
on
they
top
gave
of that, they have a horrendous driver in Paris that has been good but can't perform now for some reason.
I mean, the only thing they gave him was fastest lap to take away from Lando.
Yeah, and that was that was a pity point. I won't really sugarcoat anything.
It wasn't I don't like not saying that Daniel didn't agree to it because he probably would and he I think if I believe it believes what was said he set the fastest lap during the race ever, like, he holds that, but I don't get what they did, like, he did a 3-stop strategy, I'm pretty sure, because he went soft, medium, soft, like, what are you doing? It's Singapore, you're not you they pitted him on lap 10, who the frick are they undercutting? Nobody.
If they would have done it right, they would have done medium, hard, soft. But no,
Put him on the hard to start. He wasn't starting at the back because I think he was 16th or 15th, but
or better yet, the other way around. So hard, medium, soft.
I was gonna say start him on the hards, let him go long, see if there's a safety car, and then
Yep,
build a
that
gap, get
that was
a
my logic.
yeah.
So the beginning is always frantic. Have him on hards. Let him manage those tires for the first third of that race. And then for the second, have him on medium. And for the last part, then have him on soft. But
I
no.
mean, I know people give crap to McLaren about like switching him like at the end of the 2022 season, but at least McLaren gave him the decency of finishing the dang season.
That was that was a good move on their part.
I don't get it. I don't get what our Red Bull is doing anymore. Like it doesn't make sense.
No, of course. Of course, we will discuss market changes come the off season at some point.
Like
And
I feel this is not how I wanted to see him end.
no, I agree.
This is not I hope well, I can't even say like, oh, well, they keep Liam in the seat for until the like say what I said in Singapore, I think it was, is that they put Liam in the seat at Coda, they let him drive until the last race, they figure out what's happening, and then in the last race they give him his send off. They can't even do that because he's leaving. Like he's fully leaving. Like no more ties. I don't even know what to say.
uh, I can't really disagree about that. I understand it. I agree with it. And I think a lot of people agree with what you're saying.
Yep, there it is. 2 minutes ago, Liam Lawson will replace Daniel Ricciardo. No one's surprised.
And like I said earlier, we will of course do market changes come the off season, but as of right now, the grid is more or less set for next season.
We're just waiting on the second Sauber seat.
Yep, and that's the only vacant seat at the moment.
There's 2 vacant seats. It's VCarb's second seat and it's Sauber's second seat. But you got to think that one
Mhm.
VCarb will either be. It really depends. Like the Sauber seat, again, I think they're throwing a dart at a board and they'll figure out who the heck's going in it. If it's Bortoletto, if it's Botas, if it's Colapinto, hell, even if Danny gets the seat, like it's gonna be like them throwing a dart at a dartboard. It makes it interesting for the VCarb seat because if Lawson comes in and outperforms Yuki, kind of like what he was doing last year, because he did outperform Yuki when he came in, that proves that he's probably taking Checo's seat, especially if these rumors for Checo retiring are confirmed. The issue comes down to is if Lawson doesn't, or he's only on par with Sonoda, and Perez still doesn't perform, what do they do
Mm.
then? Like,
Okay, yeah, we don't really know that.
I don't see Checo saving it. I don't see him because if the Red Bull is as bad as it is, which it is, I think Max is only going to get the best out of it, and Checo is not going to be there. It's going to be like Singapore all over again, where Max pulls the second and Checo's down in 10th, but he qualified 13th. So I don't see Checo staying next season. I don't see how they, especially because of how close it is going to be next season. I don't see how Red Bull can keep him next season. Yes, I understand he has a contract, but his contract clauses are fully in place that he can be kicked. Do they throw Lawson because they're not gonna promote Yuki. We already know this. I think it's a well known that they don't see Yuki as
Mm.
first team worthy. I'll say it that way.
And of course, he has the Honda ties, so
Hmm.
that kind of forces him to stay in that V carb seat.
Yeah, and with them going to Ford in 2026, it makes sense. They're not gonna unless he can like somehow get a win next season. I don't see it happening.
Or better yet, sign with Aston Martin.
Well, no, I know, but I'm saying the only reason I see him staying in Red Bull is if he gets like a win or something like that next season.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
but if they're on par, do they just throw Lawson into that seat next to Max just because he has the rest of the season under his belt, so he'll have what he did 4 races, he'll have 10 races under his belt, and then you have, let's say you have Hadjar go into that second seat next to Yuki. I think that team might explode, but whatever.
Mm.
Or do they go outside? Because I know Horner mentioned George at one point. Do you see them possibly doing a shot in the dark and like pull and sign a George Russell R for that second R Red Bull seat? Do they maybe sign if Colapinto doesn't get the Sauber seat? Maybe they sign Colapinto and do the opposite of what RB did with Albon, where Albon went to Williams and then from Red Bull, whereas this time it's Colapinto going from Williams to Red Bull. Do they do that?
Yeah, that would be a very interesting prospect.
I think there are two options I don't want. One option, Hajar going into the V carb seat because I think him and Yuki will kill each other.
And that's
We've
the don't want, right?
That's a don't want. And then the other one is I don't want I mean I do want to see it, but I don't want to see it is a George Max lineup.
Ooh, that's a feisty one.
I mean, look at Baku last year when freaking George put a hole in Max's side pod. But I think a Colapinto Max would be interesting to see. I would go with that. But I
Mm.
really don't know what Red Bull's doing anymore. The amount of hate I'm seeing now for Red Bull for how they just for this whole thing is it's warranted.
Yes, and of course, this is not to upset Red Bull fans in any way. You know who you are.
But you're coming. It a lot of Red Bull fans were very high on Danny. Like it's not even like because I know like as I said, or if people don't know, I fully got into the sport last year, but I knew of the sport since 2016, so I knew of Danny. Danny was the reason I understood Red Bull. Like, if you were to ask me back in 2016 about F1, I could have told you Danny Ricciardo's name. I could have told you Sebastian Vettel's name, Mick Schumacher's name, or not Mick Schumacher, Schumacher's name in general, and
Mm,
Michael's name, and then I could have told you Max's name and Lewis's name.
right. So you knew the bare basics,
I knew I knew who drivers were. I didn't know how, and I knew that Michael was is a legend. I knew Danny and Lewis were like the upper comers. Same with I knew Seb was like the darling, and then Max was like the new young blood.
but Vettel, of course, retired in 2022. Verstappen isn't really young blood anymore.
Well, he's my age.
Well, I'm saying in F1 years, he's about to be 50.
I would not agree with that statement. I would say he's in his mid 30s. He's in his prime. If we're going 50s, we're saying Alonso, we're saying Lewis. More Lewis in my opinion than Alonso because Alonso's defying age.
Like I said earlier, he has been on the grid since the beginning of time,
Yeah. But I think
more or
that
less.
wraps it up.
Yeah,
I don't really want to talk about this anymore because I'm upset.
it became sad really quick.
Well, I'm just sitting here and like my Discord's blowing up. I'm like, what the heck's happening? I open Discord and it's like, oh, well, that explains it.
I'm sad now.
Like it's even before Coda. It's before Coda. We just
It's
I
3 weeks before Kota. Jesus.
I say that because one, we lost our actual American, which I don't disagree with. Don't get me wrong. That decision was fine. Again, how they handled the situation, different story. But now we lose our honorary American. I feel so bad for Liam come Coda because none of this is his fault, but I feel like he might get booed.
He will get a lot of hate coming
Uh,
into Kota.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think he should. He's not the one who should get the hate. If you're gonna hate anybody, hate the management. So if you see like Horner or Helmet or whoever the team principal for VCarb is, boo them.
If
Do
you
not
see Laurent Marquis, boo him.
don't boo the drivers, don't boo the engineers. They're not in charge of the decision making. Boo the management people.
Yep. Or to say it a little bit easier, don't hate the player, hate the game.
I need to know what Max said. I need to know what Max says. Has Max posted anything? Also, can we just talk about we only have 6 more races of Charles and Carlos together? I'm gonna cry.
Yeah.
Like, this is gonna make me cry. I was prepared for Daniel to leave at the end of the season. Like, that's what I was prepared for. Not frickin'. I was prepared for the end of the season to be a cry fest because Lewis is leading Mercedes. You have the C2 duo breaking up. I'm gonna cry off that. You had probably Daniel leaving at the end of the season, was gonna cry off that. Well, now I'm crying sooner.
December 8th, 2024 is going to be a sad day for all of us.
I'm not looking forward to that day.
It's a sad day for F1. If you aren't an F1 fan, but know an F1 fan, be there for them. Please.
Be ready for a long off season. That's all I'll say.
Be ready for what will be a long Cryfest. December 2024 will be hard.
Especially if Lando somehow wins the championship. Like, there's going to be tears of joy. There's going to be tears of sad. It's just going to be a mess.
It's gonna be tears of joy, tears of sadness, tears of anger, tears of anguish,
I
tears of
mean,
everything, basically. Yeah.
Lando will probably cry. You'll see Will Joseph crying. You'll see Zach Brown crying. Max might cry because he lost, and it's because, and not because of his own thing, it's because the Red Bull went to I wonder if this plays. I know I said we're going to finish up, but my brain went on a train of thought and I thought about something. So Max has stated that he's threatened to leave more because of the community service thing and the cursing. But I wonder now with how Red Bull has handled this whole Daniel Ricciardo situation, if he leaves earlier. And I'm not saying like leaves to another team, like I think actually leaves.
So he leaves F1, which
Or
which
he
has
just
been very likely for a few seasons now, but
I mean he already stated he's not staying on the grid for longer than I think. It's implied that he's not going to stay on the grid longer than his 2028 contract. Like 2028 will be his last season. But I
yeah,
wonder
that's been implied for a long while. But
I wonder if this pushes him to maybe take a year off, like in 2026, like some people have speculated, especially if like the Red Bull isn't there next year.
or possibly also next year that he does this Alonso thing, takes a 1-year sabbatical in 2025, comes back in 2026.
I think he stays for 2025. I think if he's going to take a year off, it's going to be 2026 because of the whole new regulations. See what's happening.
Right.
Plus, the other reason I say that is because if he takes off 2025, he comes back 2027. It's a little easier for him to switch team come 2027.
Yes.
And if, let's just say, if Aston is as good as people are thinking they're going to be come 2027, because Newey will be in the seams for 3 years at that point, does that give Aston the leg up to sign him when he comes back?
Could be. This became very sad very quickly.
Very, very, very annoying. Well, I think that does it. I think we're actually done now. I'm not going to say any more. I'm not going to go on any more train of thoughts. Feel free to message us either in the pit lane, through the description in our podcast on the audio formats. Feel free to reach out to us on our socials at @the_paddock. Hope we'll be back at some point to give you a review on F3, the season as a whole. If there's any more driver changes, like we finally get the announcement of VCarb fully signing Lawson, if somebody else comes in the seat, if Checo's leaving, but also if when Sauber ever announces their second seat. So we will we will be back either sometime before Coda.
One thing is for sure that we will dissect all this at some point during the off season. That's for sure.
But that will do it for us, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day whenever you're listening to this. But
Good
have
day,
a good one.
good night, good evening, good morning.